I'm Hatt with Coal Combustion Inc. and welcome to today's video seminar. I wish I could be in the Philippines. I haven't been there for a few years. But today's discussion is on burner eyebrows. So thank you for this opportunity to the Philippine coal plant users, or what we might call the PCPUG. I've seen many burner eyebrows, and I've seen some power plants that have actually minimized their formation. When I went to the internet to learn about burner eyebrows, I found very little, if any, information, particularly on how to try to minimize them. So what I'm going to use is my experience and background to talk about places that, or opportunities where people have made some adjustments in the combustion process and have been able to minimize or reduce burner eyebrows so that they don't interfere and don't cause damage. Now, most coal-fired burners will have some eyebrow formation, but they're usually small and they usually don't interfere with the combustion process. These deposits, though, particularly if they interfere with the cooling, may end up causing some damage to the burners. So we have to be careful that we don't damage the burners, which is a little bit separate issue than the burner eyebrows. Now, the problem with burner eyebrow ash deposits and all ash deposits is as they grow, they tend to melt. And this melted outside component helps capture even dry particles. So once we move away from the boiler wall or the steam tubes and we get a deposit that's not getting cooled by the water or steam, that outside of the deposit gets a very high capture efficiency. And with that high capture efficiency, the deposits can grow much faster, maybe even exponential. So we have to be careful that a little deposit doesn't grow into a big one, whatever type of ash deposit we're looking at. Now, I truly believe, but I couldn't find a good picture, I truly believe that as that coal comes out, we get little eddy currents that come back. And those little eddy currents are what's actually, particularly if it's some sort of ash particle, are what maybe forms that initial deposit. And those eddy currents are providing a continuous flow or a continuous source of particles to make an eyebrow grow. And then once you grow out a few, half a meter or a meter, you can see that you're now probably even interfering with the coal flame itself. So a large eyebrow truly can interfere with the combustion process. And besides the disruption to the combustion process, we can also start seeing burner damage as a result of eyebrows. So large eyebrows are something that we would like to try to minimize at a power plant. Here's some example of some eyebrows that I've seen throughout my career, including burner damage in here, in the sense that if you have a damaged burner, it might actually create an eyebrow faster or more than what a burner in good condition might produce. Some of this burner damage has been caused by too low of primary airflow. One of the things that I see most power plants doing is using too high of primary airflow. High primary airflow has several advantages to the operator. It provides better drying of the coal at a lower temperature. It provides faster mill response time to changes in loading. It can minimize or eliminate rejects from the bottom of the mill in the rejects or pyrite handling system. So there are some advantages to an operator to have high primary airflow. The problem being that high primary airflow tends to sweep the coal out of the mill at a larger size and also have quite a high velocity at the burner tip. There's also been quite a lot of experience that high primary airflow takes the coal pipes out of balance. So you'll end up with more coal flow in one pipe versus the other, which also, it's certainly disrupting the air to fuel ratio at the burner, but this could also lead to burner eyebrow issues. One of the other things that's important to pay attention to is what I'll describe as the wind box to furnace differential pressure. Another, how much pressure is behind that register providing the secondary air and maybe even the overflow air. How much pressure is there? Are you running with the vanes open so there's little pressure and low velocity secondary air? Or can you tighten those registers up and get a higher velocity secondary air which helps with combustion and cooling the burner situation. So one of the things we have to be careful of is the primary airflow being faster than that secondary airflow. And when you use high primary airflow and you have low wind box to furnace differential pressure, there's a good opportunity for that to happen. And you could also see that higher velocity of secondary air coming in around the burner is going to help push the flame and the particles away. So those are two things that we might be looking at. So to try to minimize these burner eyebrows, here's some suggestions that we could look at. You can back off the primary airflow. This tends to both help the particle sizing or make smaller coal particles and ash particles, and it also helps with the velocity of the burner velocity of the coal and air mixture going into the furnace. Sometimes that gets too high, particularly with low calorific or low CV coal. Another thing that you can do to sort of help mitigate these situations and help improve the fineness and the pipe-to-pipe balance is to reset the classifiers so that you create more differential pressure across that mill and a finer particle size that potentially is better distributed in those coal pipes. Finer sizes almost always distribute better than coarse sizes. So it's a lot of hard work to go and get individual coal pipe samples and look at the mass flow of coal. You have to take an isokinetic sample out of each pipe. But if you can get an estimate or a ballpark where you are, make some of these changes and retest and see if you made some improvements, this provides the performance people some opportunities to see the impacts of what things like lower primary airflow will do for a burner eyebrow. And then another important concept, and these are sort of universal statements rather than discussing individual burners, but another thing that you can do that I'm suggesting is increase that wind box to furnace differential pressure, which increases the velocity of the secondary air. Again, what we're trying to do is match the velocities better of the coal and the air coming into the burner. You don't want the situation where the coal is outrunning the air. The coal comes in fast and the air comes in slow. I think that contributes to many combustion issues, including things like secondary combustion or higher temperatures in the upper part of the furnace, causing slag deposits in places like the superheater and reheater. So we want the secondary air to at least keep up with the coal rather than the coal outrunning that secondary air. And we do that by a higher velocity, or what my indication is of a higher velocity is we've pinched back the burners and there's more differential pressure between the wind box and the furnace. So a mill or pulverizer will have a primary airflow versus coal flow curve, usually in the control system. So you should look at these curves and see where you're at. Most pulverizers are designed to operate at an air-to-fuel ratio. In other words, the tons of air divided by the tons of coal, an air-to-fuel ratio of about 1.6 up to 1.8. With subbituminous coals, we sometimes see the boiler manufacturers saying, well, maybe you could go up to 2.0. The problem being is, what is your primary air-to-fuel ratio, particularly at the high end or high loading of the mill? Have you biased the primary airflow up so that you're running 2.2, 2.4, 2.6? This is a lot of air, and it's actually hurting the performance of both the pulverizer and the flame. Here's some data I found in an old Storm Technologies paper that actually shows that as you increase the primary air-to-fuel ratio, you hurt fineness, and you also, when you hurt fineness, hurt that pipe-to-pipe balance. So one of the things that we want to try to do with the burner eyebrow issue is lower that primary airflow and get those pipes balanced so that we can get a better fineness and better pipe-to-pipe distribution. Most situations in coal pipes are probably in that 10 to 15% imbalance of coal flow, but with high primary airflow or improperly set classifiers, I've seen the pipe-to-pipe imbalances go as high as 25, 30, 40%. And this is very difficult to adjust for things like NOx, eyebrows, LOI, when we have such disparity between the individual burners' air-to-fuel ratios. Now, whenever we fool with combustion, there's a good chance that we're going to impact NOx. So be prepared for somewhat different NOx values as these makes these adjustments. Some will be positive and make lower NOx, but some might actually increase NOx. The better pipe-to-pipe balancing that you get from lower primary airflow and better particle fineness is tremendously helpful for the NOx process. You won't get zones of high CO and zones of high oxygen that mismatch the NOx formation. So we'd rather have a more balanced situation where we can control the NOx as opposed to having a big disparity in the oxygen and NOx values. Now, the higher secondary air velocities may impact NOx. It could make it go up, but it could also keep it the same. And if you're making other improvements like the fineness and the better balancing of the pipes, you might actually see minimal impact of doing this. But this is helpful if we're trying to address burner eyebrows. I'm not suggesting this is how we tune for NOx. This is how we might try to minimize burner eyebrow formation. Better fineness has the potential to improve NOx, or at least not make it worse. What you can do is control your air to fuel proportioning much better when you have the fine coal as opposed to large chunks that are actually making the flame disparity by going like high particle fineness over here, but very large chunks over here. Backing off the primary airflow might actually help NOx, because what you're doing is giving that coal a chance to enter the flame at a little slower velocity, and so you get better mixing and control of your flame. And because we've mentioned burner damage, I just wanted to point out a couple things. Burner damage can be caused by eyebrows and other ash deposits. I see a lot of burner damage caused by the opposite pulverizer actually feeding deposits and flame into a pulverizer that's offline. So cooling air and or some flow through that burner might be helpful to stop the deposits forming from the opposite pulverizer. Too low of primary airflow can cause burner issues, primarily because the flame can work its way back into the burner. I've seen several cases where too low of primary airflow has been an issue, usually during startup or commissioning, but I've seen several cases where operating plants had an opportunity to use more primary airflow, which remember all those beneficial aspects I mentioned at the beginning for the operators. We might consider thermocouples or some way to measure the temperatures of burners. Remember, there's a sticking temperature. If the burner is allowed to get hot, in other words, it doesn't have cooling air, the slag will actually stick to the steel at some temperature. So if we can keep this steel cool, the slag won't stick to it. So these are just some ideas or suggestions. They all are basic combustion tune-up concepts, but I've seen them actually minimize eyebrow formation. I've included Dave Rogers' Boardman plant paper to see what a power plant guy actually had to do to improve his combustion, and then notice that his 1 and 2 meter eyebrows now have disappeared after the combustion improvements. Thank you again, Ed Cruz, and all the people at the PCPUG that have helped me put this together and made suggestions. But I'm willing to help you guys out and try to promote some of the activities that we're doing here at Coal Combustion.